Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to our No Labels, No Walls Action Monday right here on No Labels, No Walls. My name is Kevin. I'll be co-hosting, moderating this evening, wherever you are. But we have a interesting topic tonight. Before we start, let's go around the horn and see everybody. Let's see. How are you doing, Marcus?
Thank you so much. This is Markus Vähälä from Finland, from Citizen Network and Kukunari. I'm very glad to host this Action Monday together with you, Kevin, and together with you, Neasley. Welcome, all of you.
I'll set you right up. Neasley, how are you doing? Do you want to take over? I know we said last week, but if you want, up to you.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Neasley, and I am joining in from Los Angeles, California. Not exactly in LA, but I live in the surrounding of LA. So good to be here. Welcome, everyone. And I am not sure if anybody's had an opportunity yet to introduce themselves, so I'll just go around.
Yeah, we just started.
We just started, okay. I had my alarm on, I was ready. And then my internet said, oh, no, not yet. So good morning. I'll start with someone I have never met. Bridget, are you able to unmute yourself and introduce yourself?
Yep. Hello, my name is Bridget Vogt. I am calling in from Bellevue.
Hello,
Kentucky.
Layla.
Yeah, go ahead, Bridget.
Oh, I just said I'm calling in from Bellevue, Kentucky.
All
So
right.
I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here. Lois, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. I'm Lois Diggs, and I'm here in the coastal city of Norfolk, Virginia, in the United States. Thank you.
Lovely. Welcome. Cynthia?
Good and glorious morning. Thank you so much for asking me. My name is Cynthia Leonard. I am in Fort Smith, Arkansas. I work with agora-iop.org and Radio Hydrogen. So I'm really looking forward to today's meeting. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Yes, it's good to see you again, Cynthia. Good to see you again. Riku.
Hi, Neasley. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm just back from Blueberry Land. I have this remarkable desert of blueberries, and it was very delicious. I'm doing great.
That's great. I love blueberries. Speaking of which, I have to go pick up some. Carol, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone.
Oh, sorry. We have two Carol. Go ahead, Carol Blessing.
I'm Carol Blessing. I am in Albany, New York, in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you. Combs.
Hi, I'm Carol Combs, and I'm calling in from Hamilton, Ohio, which is just north of Cincinnati, and I'm happy to be here today.
Great. We're taking a tour of the good old USA. I am loving it. Athena.
Hello.
Hi, and where are you joining us from, Athena?
Kent.
Kent. Oh, lovely. Lovely. Are you having good weather out there?
Yes.
Okay, great. I hope you got to enjoy it today. Good. Thank you for joining us, Daniette.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danietta Najoli, and I am in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm glad to be here.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. Simon.
Hello, I'm Simon, and I'm from Sheffield in the north of England. Lovely to be with you.
Good to see you again, Simon. Alistair.
Hi there, I'm Alistair Minty from Aberdeen in the north east of Scotland, and I do some work with In Control Scotland, some work with Manavidi people-based development, and also my own organisation, Positively Minty.
Thank you, Alistair. It's always a joy to be around Alistair. Alistair has become my new best buddy. Lasse, good morning.
Good morning, or actually good evening from here.
Ooh.
I live in Helsinki, Finland, and I just decided to pop in to see and hear what's going on today.
Good to see you. Miss seeing you around lately, so I'm glad you made it. Linda?
Hi, everyone. I'm calling in from Toronto in Ontario, Canada.
All right. Wow. Hi. Nice to have you here. Paul.
Hi, good morning. I'm Paul McKenzie. I'm from East Coast, not too far from Lois. And I, like last, I just wanted to stop in and see what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Paul. Thank you for joining us. Kelsey. Can you hear us, Kelsey?
I oh, hang on. I just find the right screen. I usually do this.
Oh, we lost Kelsey. Okay, when we get Kelsey back. Layla, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Layla. I'm from Kent.
Nice to see you, Layla. It's good to have you joining us. Hi, Ewan, my other new friend. How are you, Ewan? Long time.
Yeah, long time no see. Sorry. Yeah, I was doing things there. Yeah, I'm fine. It's sort of wind. It's the sun coming out. It's a spring, but it's chilly here. So, but nice to see you all and get back into the group again because I like listening to what everyone's saying. Okay, thank you. Have a nice day. Nice to you all.
Oh, I'm glad you're here. It's good to see you. I miss seeing you around. Kelsey's back. Let's try it again. Hi, Kelsey.
Hello. Now I think it's working.
Okay.
Find the right screen. Yeah, just hopping on in between things going on today.
Great. Where are you called? Where are you joining us from?
Yeah, I'm in Morningview, Kentucky right now.
All right. So it is, we've covered the entire United States. Welcome, Kelsey. It's good to have you join us. And I will invite Tim to introduce himself. And I believe, yes, go ahead, Tim.
Thanks, Nestle. Calling from one floor below Bridget. So.
All right. Good. Thanks for joining us. Amber?
Hi, I'm Amber calling from Cincinnati, Ohio.
All righty, Cincinnati in the house. Cincinnati for the win. Everyone, welcome, and I am looking forward to this conversation. Did I miss anyone? If I missed anyone, just unmute yourself. Jack. Hi, come on.
Hi there, I'm Jack Pierpoint in Toronto with Inclusion Press, and I'm one floor above Linda Kahn.
I love it. I love it. We could just go like this. All right, everyone, welcome and let's have fun. Marcus?
Oh, thank you, Neasley. Thank you, Kevin. Kevin, the mic is yours.
Oh, well, thank you once again, Neasley. So we have a very special group of guests for you tonight. We have the people over at Starfire. The floor is yours.
Hi. Amber again. So I will be getting this party started. And so my name is Amber Kelly. I am with Community Engagement Collective, which is a nonprofit in Cincinnati that focuses on fostering human-centered connections through community-engaged events and research. And I have some friends with me from Starfire on the line. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves or share any more?
I'm Danietta Najoli, and I work at Starfire as a community builder, and I'm excited to be a part of this conversation today.
And I'm Tim. I work with Danietta, and I'm a big fan of Amber. So happy to be here with y'all.
And Carol, would you like to say anything?
It's just excited to be here supporting you all and being a part of sharing the goodness. Thank you.
So the big question on everyone's minds is, how did we get here and why are we here at this moment? And so I had the pleasure of participating in UnConference at Starfire, which was essentially a conference that highlighted gifts of community members. And what I loved about it, it was not like the traditional conferences where, you know, you're going to one session after the other by somebody. Sometimes it's a little stuffy, but I love the community centeredness of it and how people, we all have gifts, and the fact that the conference just highlighted simply just that. And there were other elements like coming together for a meal and having national guest speakers that really focus on fostering, bringing people together. So we all have one common thing, which is experiencing this pandemic. And during this time, people have been feeling so disconnected as a result of needing to isolate as a result of this pandemic. And so one of the things that kind of started percolating in my mind was, so what's going on with this UnConference? Is something going to happen during this time? So maybe we can try to get people back together and feeling connected and highlighting their gifts. And so the first thing I did was reach out to Tim and just kind of said, hey, what's going on here? Is this something that's been happening? And so we started talking and kind of figuring like, hey, this has kind of been a pause, but pause does not mean stop. Pause just means simply that, just a pause. And so now we're sort of pressing the play button and trying to get things moving in a direction that fits what is needed right now. And also just focusing on continuing the tradition of highlighting individuals' gifts. And now I will pass it on over to Tim.
Thanks, Amber. So Amber's big question to me was, can we do this cool experience again? And I was like, yes, we can do it. So we started brainstorming. And one of the things that kind of popped up was, this group, No Labels, No Walls, and the connection to Citizen Network and the connection to CitizenFest. And we were like, man, CitizenFest kind of sounds like what we were doing with the UnConference. And we're like, well, what if we told the story of how we got to build our UnConference, and maybe that would be of interest to the Action Mondays group if they wanted to think about how to start their own CitizenFest. So that's what we thought we would do today. And so you'll hear from Amber, then me and Danietta, and then Amber again. So, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'll just give you, I'm here to just give you a little bit of the background. And just to tell you Starfire's quick story, we are here in Cincinnati, Ohio, and we ran outings for people with disabilities, and we, had dances for people with disabilities, and we had a big day program for people with disabilities. It was really awesome work. Everybody had fun, but we started to have some questions. Is there something more that we could do? Something that was different than just grouping people. And we really started to be uncomfortable with some of the grouping that we were doing. And we started to wonder, what else could there be? I want to tell you about a night here in Cincinnati that was really impactful for me. I was the director of Starfire until about 2017, but around 2007, Starfire got an invitation. Somebody said, Tim, you should come to this thing. And it was the gentleman on your left there, Peter Block, and the gentleman in the middle, John McKnight, and the formidable force that is Judith Snow on the right. And I had never heard of any of these people. And when we got to the big presentation, Peter Block welcomed us. And he said this one line I can't forget, which is, we have better stories than our problems. We got to talk about our city and ourselves and our communities with all the gifts that we've got, all the great stories. And I was like, okay, cool. And then John McKnight got up there and he told us this story. And he said, I have a bad heart. He said, it's worth about $500,000 to the University of Chicago hospital. He said, it's not worth anything to my family or my neighbors. And then he left us with this line, which was, beware of people who profit off of other people's problems. And we were like, oh my gosh, I think he's talking about us. Are we profiting off of people's problems? And what the heck do you do when somebody points that out to you? And then Judith got up there and she said, there's no such thing as disability. She says, what I can't do is different from what you can't do, but what I can do is also different from what you can do. So it's just about giftedness. And we got to figure out how to study, learn, celebrate, and take action with our gifts. So that was a big moment that just disrupted everything for me and for us as an organization. And a couple of years later, as we kind of like were thinking about all these questions, John and Peter got together and they wrote this book, The Abundant Community, which you can get at inclusion.com. Basically the story was, how do you discover the gifts of your neighbors? And I got a call from Peter's assistant, because Peter lives here in Cincinnati, and he said, the assistant said, Peter and John are going to have a conversation about giftedness and they'd like you to show up. So I ended up going to this meeting with Peter and John, and I listened to John as he said, we've become a society of rusty citizens. He said, we just don't quite know how to really take care of each other like we used to, right? And then Peter said, he said, if you walked out of your front door and you went within a mile of your front door, he said, I bet you could find enough gifts to fill up 5 schools of teachers. And what he was talking about was this idea that everybody around us is like a walking treasure chest. You know, everybody around us has something they know, or that they're an expert at, or that they're interested in, or that they're really passionate about. And they asked if I would start to interview my neighbors. And so I did. And, you know, I discovered he was right. Everybody around me was this amazing story. They had interesting histories. They had cool ideas. They had really great talents that I never even considered. One neighbor's a potter, and another neighbor was a bluegrass folk musician, you know, and another neighbor knew how to grow the most amazing vegetables. And it was just terrific to see. And what was interesting was that it started to change me as a person. I started to notice that the people around me were full of gifts, but it started to really kind of make me think about Starfire. Here we were with a building and a bunch of programs that had a bunch of people, and in John's language, they were part of our programs because of their problems, but they had to have gifts too, right? And so I started to ask, what would happen if we looked for all these people's gifts? What would happen if we looked around and found the gifts that were around them too? What if what was true about my block and my neighborhood, that they were full of gifted people, what if that was true around every neighborhood, right? And that was what John and Peter were saying, which is we live in an abundant community. And you can see the subline of their book, how do we awaken the power of families and neighborhoods? So we started playing around. I did something super weird, which was I took $28,000 in our budget and I started hiring people to interview their neighbors around Cincinnati. And over the course of a year, we had collected somewhere in the neighborhood of 600 stories. And we would get together once a month in each neighborhood, and we would hear what the interviewers were discovering. So you can see an example, an interviewer says, hey, we know about this possible photography project that's going on, and there's somebody that's going to go camping, and there's somebody that's going to be at a film festival, and we would just list this out, and then we would start to ask, well, who do we know that's in our program that has a gift that they share with the people that we're meeting all over the city? It was pretty wild. It felt a little bit like it was outside of the box, because here we are paying neighbors to interview each other. But what we discovered was beautiful. Joe, for example, was interested in history, and we started to have our staff network the neighborhoods around Joe, and they discovered all these people around Joe that were interested in history, and he started a historical reenactment project, right? And he got to meet other people who cared about history. That's him standing with one of the ancestors of this woman on the right. Her ancestors were the founding family of Cincinnati. Margot, we networked around stories. She loved hearing people's stories, so she started a story slam. And the networking was then, who do we know that has a story to share? Their gift could just be their story. And we held this every single month, where people would come and meet up and tell their stories. And Margot was part of the team that hosted it. Nick was interested in metaphysics, so we would network with the Cincinnati Metaphysical Society. Sometimes they would have dream interpretations. In the middle of the night, I would get a little alarm notification on my phone that there were people in the building. And then Nick would say, don't worry, it's just us. We are hosting a dream interpretation hotline tonight, But it was interesting because it could work with any of these stories. So it started with Joe's passion in this regard, and we found other people who cared about history. But in this regard, it started with just story. Margot didn't really have a specific passion, but she liked hearing about everybody's passion. So we found other people that cared about stories and had stories to share. And in Nick's case, the Metaphysics Society already existed, but we knew he cared about that too. And then it was a matter of, how do we share the gifts that Nick has and other people have in creating something new, something interesting, right? So we had all these cool projects that were going on, and then we were kind of wondering what else we could do with this stuff. And I'm going to turn it over to Danietta in a second. But before I do, I want to tell you this. This discovery that we were surrounded by gifts changed us all as people. We started to look for it more and more and more. And we were looking for it in everybody. We couldn't just look for it in like the rulers of our communities or the mayor or the school board or whoever. We had to look for it everywhere, and we could start to see it everywhere, right? It was awesome. And it didn't just change us as people, but it also changed us as an organization. So all of a sudden we started to think like, man, we're putting all this money, like John says, into keeping people inside of our box, our programs, and our building. What if we could figure out a way to use all this money and all this time to connect people like we're seeing in these cool projects, to help people be seen for their gifts and their things that they can offer the world, right? So then, of course, this is the question, which is, what else could we do with all these treasures? So I'll turn it over to Danietta, and she can tell you a little bit more about that.
Okay. Yeah, so I'd like to just share about how we arrived at the learning labs and then on to our UnConferences. So the learning labs kind of started when we as a community of employees and community builders were invited by our leadership, Tim, as you have seen, to start something good in our neighborhood as an extension of what we were already doing in our work. It was completely voluntary, and we had about 4 or 5 neighborhood learning labs going. So we started in places in Cincinnati like Price Hill and Northside, and even across the Ohio River in Bellevue, Kentucky, and all pretty cool places. We asked questions like, how might we discover and highlight the gifts, talents, and interests of our neighbors? we became curious about our neighbors and wondered what gifts they had, what shared interests they may have with each other and with the people we support. So this flyer is just one of learning labs, 1 month's worth of learning labs in 3 neighborhoods, as you can see. But look at the different topics in 1 month. We invited our neighbors into things like writing together in a writing circle in Northside, learning how to make sushi in Silverton, and even Afro-Brazilian dance and culture in Price Hill. So it was definitely a diverse mix of topics. And if you notice where these places were hosted, they were actually hosted in different places in the neighborhood. And that was intentional. It was intentional not to hold it at the Starfire building where there was already a strong label of disability associated with it. We wanted to help create a culture where a sense of belongingness and was reinforced within the larger community. So sometimes, as Tim mentioned, the learning labs were based on a person with a disability and what they may be thinking about, but sometimes it was based on the community and what many neighbors were interested in. The idea was that if people connected through their shared interest, it would be less important that some people had intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so let's look at a couple of flyers to show how we set the learning labs up. We'd all gather as a large group and meet up at the beginning, offer a welcome and introductions, have refreshments, and sometimes even have dinner as part of the get together, the learning lab, basically setting the tone and the space. And then we'd introduce the learning lab topics that would be happening that evening so people could vote with their feet on where they wanted to go and what they wanted to learn. So on the back end of that, we had a few people, a few core planners who would help us with spreading the word and lining up the speakers and presenters and other details for the event. But the learning labs ran for a little over a year. And what we found was that there were many people who wanted to share their gifts with their neighbors. We just had to be willing to make the invitations. So it was all a big practice in community building design and trying out new things in a place, a neighborhood, where we could kind of test drive, kick around the tires, and include others in the community in which the people we support lived. And so it truly made us notice the beautiful and diverse expressions of gifts and talents that were almost hidden within our neighborhoods. We also saw how beautiful it was to host our neighbors, something that we might not normally do. When was the last time you invited your neighbor to something and invite them to do something together? And then we started to imagine what else was possible. So we began to travel in small learning teams to visit with the good people who are on this call too, at the Toronto Summer Institute to learn from their thoughtful and inclusive practice of open source learning. They hosted these summer institutes for many, many years, which had many of the elements of the learning labs, with one exception. You didn't know what you would learn in the afternoons at their wonderful learning marketplace. So until you got there. So everyone came with their own knowledge and their strengths and interests and passions and gifts around inclusion. And the Toronto Summer Institute made beautiful space for people to share them. So the mornings were mapped out so you could choose to learn from amazing people like Beth Mount and John O'Brien on person-centered approaches, and John McKnight on asset-based community development, and there were many others. But the afternoons, you could teach a class or lead a shared experience. I mean, I remember there were so many topics people offered in the mini commercials when people got up on the mic and talked about what they wanted to share. Here's a picture of the open source spaces to the left, and then where people offered up things to teach and where people signed up to learn. So this was an impactful and life-changing week-long experience for me, and I was really fortunate to have gone for 2 years and participated. But what we asked ourselves is, what if this was focused on local citizens? Because after we came back from Toronto, we wondered that question. We wondered, what if this was focused on people locally, and what if it could be done at no cost to the participant? Like, what if it was free and all the people had to do was just show up and be willing to engage? That got us thinking that maybe we could host a local UnConference, a similar open learning space, so that people could have a way to build meaningful relationships based on common interest and continue to do life together in person. And that's when we began to explore hosting these UnConferences. So it looked a lot like the Toronto Summer Institute in many ways. And so here at one of our kickoff events, Bridget, one of our veteran community builders, is at our learning space here, and someone is sharing something that they want to teach right there on the right. And also, we have lots of conversations during that kickoff time as well. David Hsu was a main presenter, and he spoke about his work around the impact of social isolation. So here are some pictures from our second UnConference of the learning marketplace over there on the left, and then more conversations and sharing what we wanted to teach and learn together. It was bigger this time because with each new iteration, we learned how to host it even better. And then the next slide is a picture of our third UnConference in action. And we even strung a couple of time slots together to offer experiences off-site where a small group could learn together somewhere in the community. So that was pretty neat to do. So we had lots of interaction there, and you can see several pictures. And this is the final slide of the conference. Here are a couple of lineups from the UnConference where you might see the School of Metaphysics is there on the left there, where Nick and one of the members, Nick is one of the members at Starfire, and he's part of the School of Metaphysics, and he co-led one of the sessions. We had a few people who actually co-led sessions, but we held 3 of these 3-day UnConferences, and each of them let us know that we could host something local, something beautiful, and citizen-led. It was like one giant learning lab. And we discovered that the local CitizenFest idea sounded a lot like the learning labs and the UnConferences we did. And Amber's here to talk about that now.
Yeah. And so we're at this exciting phase of still learning. What should this look like? How can we bring people together? How can we encourage gift sharing in a way that makes people feel comfortable? We are in the middle of a pandemic. So how would this fit into this space? And the previous iterations that got us to this point were in person. So what does this look like digitally? How can this be done in a way that engages people to not only share their gifts, but come and learn from others that are willing to share their gifts? And so we are really trying to figure out what should this look like, and letting it be an opportunity for continuous learning, as we know that, you know, along this process, we're going to have more ideas. We may want to do something different, but making sure that community voice is at the center of it, and make sure it's done with an intentionality of inclusiveness, specifically as it comes to making sure people feel like they are a part of this, and making sure that gifts are being shared in a way that allow people to connect, which is something that has not really been able to happen during this time. And so how do you foster this connection in a time where people are so disconnected? And how can you reach those that are the most disconnected to participate in what this would look like? And so I know with this being Action Monday, there's typically an action associated, but our action right now simply is just being open to learning and being open to the possibility. And once we get to the point of we have, hey, this is the prototype, we're gonna go out there and put it out there. We hope that we can come back and say, hey, this is our ask of you. This is where we are, and this is the event that we're going to have, and we'd love for you to share it, participate, and collaborate and learn with us.
So I think that's what we have, and we thought we would open it up and see if anybody had any questions or ideas. What does this feel like to you? You know, could you imagine this in your community? Open up to the floor. Marcus, Kevin, Easley.
Alistair has a question.
Yeah, no, I was just linking into a couple of things that have happened in Scotland in the past. Many years ago, probably mid-90s, based on some of the principles that you're talking about. There was that sort of community circles work, and I actually myself got involved in that, and I remember it being initially, because my work has generally been with folk with learning disabilities, I thought I'd be going along and getting matched up with somebody who maybe had a learning disability, who had maybe you know, an interest in mountain biking or snowboarding or something like that. And I ended up getting matched, not based on an activity, but based on, I got matched with a young woman with a mental health issue who actually was based on somebody else felt I had the same sense of humor as her. And that was really awkward to start with, I'll be honest with you, because I was a bit like, oh, I'm not quite sure how, you know, what the rules are for this, because I thought the rules for, you know, for a community circle with, if it was somebody with a disability, that would work out fine. But I thought I was a little bit, you know, uncomfortable as a bloke, as a man, you know, just about how this was going to work. And you know what, myself and this young woman remained friends for like 10 years, did heaps of stuff together, and it just became a really natural friendship. I only really lost touch with her when she moved away down to England. And I found that to be something that we kind of lost track of. So we started that, and it kind of, some people took it forward, but I think that we've moved away from a lot of that work here, that intentional work to connect people based on who they are, not on their disability or what have you, and making that stuff happen. And I think that's an indicator of how we're not always making progress here. We're sometimes falling backwards. Another thing that was really good, that was really positive, was Pat Black and Andy Smith did a thing called This Is Not a Conference. They did a couple of them. And those were really powerful get-togethers where just people were telling their stories and engaging about what they could do and what they brought to things. And it was an incredible atmosphere. And Ewan, who's here today, he was along at one of them with me, and it was just a great positive atmosphere. And I think we definitely need more of these intentional efforts to connect and see people's values.
Thanks, Alistair. Layla, you have your hand up?
Yeah. Oh dear, I was a bit. I'm okay. I was just a bit. I was just a bit upset. That's all, because Keith isn't there, and neither
I had a
is.
question, but
Yeah, I do, and neither was Michael. So I'm okay. It's just when there's no one there that I don't really properly get on well with, it just throws me a little bit, because I know both of them, and you are lovely, but I just I'm not in touch with you all the time.
I understand. But
I'm
don't forget, this is a huge community, so don't forget, you're not alone in this. Even if everyone's not here, we're all working together in spirit.
The question, I do go to Dover in BMIT, and we are a non-profit company, and we do work with learning disabilities. So yeah. So yes, that's all.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate it. Does anybody have any other questions or comments? Simon?
Thank you for sharing all of that, and it is so inspiring. And I think that we need more of this recorded and shared. It helps people understand how we can go on this journey. I suppose one question I have, it might relate a little bit to Layla's situation as well. But I have friends, the people who inspire me most are a group called PFG Doncaster, People Focus Group Doncaster. And they are actually made up of people with disabilities, sometimes people with mental health labels stuck on them. Sometimes they use the mental health labels to wave them around and tell people, hey, look, I've got all these labels. It's kind of part of their identity. But they do a brilliant job of helping each other and changing their community together. And I'm really interested in the question of like how we think about how people self-organize or how peer support comes together with this. Because I suppose I'm always torn between a vision of inclusion where, if you like, all the labels fall away, which seems true and good, and then how I see people behaving when people sometimes the labels become part of how people create community in a really genuine way, I think. I mean, and so I don't have a kind of sense of right or wrong here, but given that you've done such brilliant work, I just wondered what your thoughts were about where peer support features in this, or does it feel like a different thing, or is it part of it, or just any thoughts on peer support would be welcome.
Well, I can tell you, Simon, it's a great question. Let's start with this. We had to go to the extreme opposite end of where we were, right? So Starfire was so group-based, and we had created such limits for people's lives based on disability-only experiences that in order to even get people to move to the middle, we had to go to the extreme other side, which said, if there's anything that would possibly be used by our unfortunately imperfect world to limit people, then we are going away from that as far as possible. That's partly why we just took Judith's advice, gifts, 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 right? And then the other interesting thing is when you operate at a neighborhood level, you get a real opportunity to include everybody. I think that's where we found you can just do everybody's in because everybody's defined by the geography, right? So we all live in Bellevue, Kentucky, or Kent, or Los Angeles, or wherever we are, and that defines everybody. Then everybody's all automatically in, you know? So as part of that is what Amber's been working on, is leading it at a very neighborhood level. And then one of our big questions has been, if we could get a small neighborhood win this year, what would happen if we had another neighborhood in another year or 2 years or whatever? Could there be like this compounding effect over time where you grow it on a neighborhood level, which would, again, supersede the labels that we like to give each other?
Ewan, you have a question?
Hi, yeah, that's interesting what you're saying and talking. That really interests me. But I always think, and I suppose this is, and I know this is a bit macabre, But when I go to funerals, I usually learn more about the person at a funeral than I've learned in their total lifetime. And I suppose, and that's what the gentleman is saying at Starfire, it's how, if you go and ask 10 people in the neighborhood and they started talking and telling you about their life, personal things, you'd probably get more excited. And I think this is what you're saying here. And I like that. But for me, I'm autistic. So I have to deal, that means I'm not good at socializing with people. So that for me creates a barrier sometimes. And sometimes, even with the best will in the world by the best people, I still struggle. But that's interesting what you're saying. And I agree, if I could ask 10 neighbors to tell me about their lives, it would probably create excitement and it'd be really good. Yeah. But I get what you're saying. I like that. Yeah. So that's why I think of funerals, because that's where I learn more about people's lives than any other time. Okay, right. Thank you. That makes sense. Is that okay? Right. Cheers. Yeah. Okay. That's my point.
I actually had a question, if I may ask. If it involves more so like being able to host the events. It was interesting how you said you were able to host events not necessarily at the headquarters, home base. How do you go about with just all that planning, and how all the people involved? Does it feel overwhelming, or is it just like a walk in the park?
I can talk a little bit to that as well. Having planned some of the learning labs and then being a part of the UnConference, I think a lot of that has to do with having core people in place that are, whether it's your staff that's involved and other volunteers that may want to be a part of that. But some of that can also happen in the UnConference. Like one time, I'm remembering a time when we went off site because we were all in the group we wanted to bake something, a dish together. So we had to figure it out together. We used the vehicles. We had a couple of minivans at Starfire. So we knew as staff, we could use the vehicles to drive around, get the ingredients. And then we had to come up with a place to bake this macaroni and cheese dish. And within that process, it took someone in that group coming up with a location, having those assets that they can lend to the group, because that's also a big part of community, social assets, that are not based on, the currencies that we normally think of. And so it forced us to think differently. So we came up with a place that we can actually make the dish, and then we had conversation around that. So I think it's part of that is creating that energy or those resources within the group that forms, because like you mentioned, the self-forming groups, because we don't know what's going to happen once people get together, but then also having the other side of it where you have staff that are employed, to be in place to help with logistical things. I don't know if I answered that question.
Oh, actually, that's much as I needed to. I appreciate it. Thank you for answering.
There's a couple other little points there in addition to all that Danietta said. One is when you're, think about it, I guess if you were trying to do a CitizenFest right now, that was huge, that would take years. I know even the ones that are already online have taken a few years to get going, right? So if you think about it in those small steps, like just start by interviewing the people around you, and then you're looking to appreciate and kind of keep in mind all their gifts, things they could teach. The other thing that's interesting about the place is that's part of the treasure hunt. Where are the places in your neighborhood where people could gather, and one of them, to Ewan's point, could be digital. That's what Amber's kind of bringing to the forefront, which is what if you're more comfortable in a digital space like this? So she's looking to kind of iterate and build that on top of what we've been doing. The last thing I would say is that opportunity to participate and help and pitch in is part of the treasure hunt, right? So if you find out that there's a teacher, one of our UnConferences was led and planned by a teacher who was off for the summer. she just wanted something cool to do with her time. Another one was helped planned by some students who wanted to do an internship over the summer, right? So then they took their time. That's part of the gifts. Do you have any time to do something interesting? Who's got a marketing expertise? Who knows all about social media? Those are all opportunities for the gifts to shine through.
Thank you, Tim. Neasley, you have a question?
Well, it's not necessarily a question, but I was just thinking about the work that you do and trying to put it into some context of how I can understand it, right? I am a pastor, and basically that's part of what I do every day is like bringing out the gifts of the people in our community and bringing them out to shine, getting them to share and do all of that. And so I was thinking on when the pandemic hit, we kind of had to go, okay, how do we keep a community going? And one of the things we found out by going digital and just inviting not just the people we knew, but inviting everybody to the table and say, hey, what do you do? Like, what are interests to you? What would you like to talk about? And then inviting them to come through as speakers. And we're creating a thing right now called the welcoming table. And the welcoming table is going to be for the community, when we go back to coming together to have community dinners. I used to host something like a community dinner, but it was in my home. So people could invite people, and a lot of people that I didn't know from whatever the background, and we would sort of like share a meal and discuss a topic and things like that. So I was just thinking, okay, is this kind of like in the same line? And then if it is, I'm just trying to figure out how I can wrap my brain around it. So that was the one thing. The other thing I thought about is there is this app called Nextdoor. And I was just, as you were talking, I was thinking this is a great way to reach into a community using that app, because that's one of the things I found. That's how I actually got to know my community. After living here for over 6 years, it wasn't until the pandemic and I joined that app that I started seeing things, people who were like, hey, I've got all these lemons. Does anybody want lemons? Somebody was like, hey, I've got this really great recipe with different type of things for lemon. I'm baking such and such. Anybody wants? And so I started seeing these communities sort of like coming together around certain shared abilities and gifts and things like that. So I really like what you guys are doing. It makes sense to me.
And I think one way to wrap your head around it with the first part is sort of thinking about, okay, do you know the gifts of your neighbors? And what type of setting would allow you to learn those gifts? So let's say you have a neighbor that has a love for gardening, and you went to this event and you learned about gardening from your neighbor. That's another way to sort of convey what we're thinking as far as a vision. It's simply creating this opportunity for neighbors to share their gifts in a virtual space.
That's a cool idea. I'll have to think about it some more on aside from the fact that my calendar may not lend itself to me doing much, but I do like it. Like it intrigues me. Like getting to know people is something I'm really passionate about. So the idea absolutely intrigues me.
And thank you for reiterating about Nextdoor too, because one of that when we were thinking about sort of how do we market this from a local standpoint, that's definitely one of the avenues that we're exploring, is making sure that when we are at the point of marketing is that we're putting it on Nextdoor so we can have as much community participation and involvement as we can.
Yeah, well, thank you.
So it's 5 minutes till 1. I don't know if Amber, Dana, Tim, if anyone in Starfire had any closing statements or just anything to wrap this up. Anything you want to say? Or wait, Simon, did you have?
I saw Linda asked about CitizenFest generally. So maybe I could just take 30 seconds to explain CitizenFest for those people who've
go for it.
missed that. But Linda, I've also put the link in the thing. So CitizenFest started in 2019 in Glasgow, and then we're now growing it into a kind of attempt to link together all these global attempts to share learning, celebrate difference, stand up for equality, really. So it's a kind of festival of festivals or a network of festivals. This is the third year. So last year we had Glasgow and Helsinki and Los Angeles. This year we've got many more cities and places involved. So the Sheffield Festival is going to be the first one of the this year. And, you know, I mean, one of the thoughts I had was it'd be brilliant if we could weave the Toronto Summer Institute into this in some way, because it's really just, that's all we're trying to do is get people to see this as part of a bigger picture. And it's it's not like a controlling mechanism. It's a liberating and connecting mechanism. So it's just, we said, well, why can't we have a Citizen Fest all the time, really? And there's a little community that's growing, and you could easily join that. And then it's just learning from each other. Oh, what did you do? What could we steal from that? What can we share about that? So yeah, we've got some great people involved, and it'd be fantastic if the Toronto Summer Institute could be kind of woven in some way, and we could globally steal all your brilliant learning and share it out across this kind of strange citizen network community we're weaving or something. I'm never quite sure what the right verb is, but you know what I mean. Is that helpful anyway? And there is a link there with a kind of summary of where we are, and there is a regular event. So just give us a call and we'll make sure. I guess the other thing I'd say is that, so I'm just throw this out here, like for Citizen Network, we have a kind of quite regular set of activities that have a little bit more like European time zones as their center of gravity. And we have some folk in Australia and New Zealand. We have plenty of allies in the USA and Canada. And we have friends in Spain who would like to encourage membership from South America and Central America. What we'd really love is to find some ways of getting some kind of regular leadership around just maybe hosting some events that really suit the kind of America's time zone. We can weave things together a wee bit between Europe and America, or between America and Australia, but you can never get the whole world because people need to sleep. So you don't have to solve that, but that would be brilliant if we could have some more center of gravity around the Americas in some of the activities that's a bit missing at the moment.
Well, in 15 seconds, you can count on Toronto Summer Institute being one of the network events, because it has been a celebration of citizenship for a long time, and we certainly don't want to miss an opportunity to share. We're in.
I like that kind of decisiveness. All right, we will build on that. Brilliant.
Well, housewise, I guess one way we can wrap this up.
I'm a bit more happier, Kevin. It just takes me a while.
Well, I guess the way we can wrap this up is just ask. Marcus actually did have a question, but I got left in the chat. Where does the learning market and the meeting point of the Starfires of the world? So, Amber?
Oh, I was actually just gonna close this out, but I will let if Tim or Daniela want to address that question.
Yeah, I would say it's here and at the Toronto Summer Institute and at Simon Citizen Fest and at Amber's neighborhood. I mean, it's everywhere. Let's just keep doing it.
Well, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to learn more about what we're doing here. And we look forward to sharing our learnings with everyone. And creating this opportunity to just continuously learn and be able to keep people connected. So thank you everyone for your time today.
Well, thank you, Amber. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Danetta. Thank you, Starfire, for joining us. Be sure to join us next week, which is Action Monday, Digital Activists, how to host a digital event, how to use Zoom with breakout rooms, how to stream an event live to multiple destinations, and how to create events and gain audience for your action. We hope you next week. We hope you join next week. Yes, Layla.
Is it all to do with computers? You're talking a bit too fast.
There will be sure to follow the Facebook, No Labels, No Walls, to keep up with the action. And Neasley, I believe you get to choose who the host is next week.
Yes, I do. Oh my goodness. Well, who can I pick on to join us next week? Well, I'm not sure if Jack, will you be here next week? Can't hear you.
Let me go and check the calendar. Sorry.
Okay.
It's what we call a bank holiday in the UK next week,
Okay.
which doesn't mean that people can't do anything they like. It's just our peculiar system. But we have a little Monday holiday in the UK.
Yes, you're right.
We still do it in our houses, but
it is.
It's a little. It's our May bank holiday.
It is. That's
Up the revolution.
Well, in order to relieve you of your holiday pressures, sure, I'll sign up, but someone's going to have to brief me on what I'm supposed to do. So, but I'll be on for next week.
All you do, Jack, is just introduce. You just say people's names, and they will introduce themselves.
Okay, Leela. Well, you made you made it really succinct and straightforward. Thank you very much. So I'll see you next week.
Yes, you will.
Okay. See you next week at 9 a.m. Thank you, Starfire. Thank you, Amber, Daniela, Tim. Thank you, the whole team. Have an amazing week. And whatever you do, take a little time for yourself and be kind to yourself.
Yes.
Okay, 9 a.m. Well, we'll figure it out. See you next week.
See you, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.